Good morning, everyone. Welcome back to Talking Success. I'm joined by a very special guest this morning, all the way from St. Petersburg. Although that's kind of while she may be a citizen there, she actually does live in South Africa, in Cape Town, and we kind of met online. That sounds a bit weird, but we met on LinkedIn, and we sort of got chatting, and just absolutely fascinated by what Angela does, and I invited her onto the podcast because. I think there's some real nuggets of information that people who are in either aspiring to be leaders, are entrepreneurs at whatever level, at whatever organization, whether you're very early stage startup, whether you're mid-career, whether you're working for a bank in transformation, or you just want to sort of upskill yourself. I wanted to invite Angela Shurina along this morning and talk us through kind of what she does and her career and some of the mind-blowing projects she's worked on. So this is very much following the theme that we started a couple of months ago on the human side of FinTech, right? So FinTech's great when you have all the technology and you have APIs and you have stable coins and you have cross-border payments and you've got all of these amazing technology which is there. But let's not forget it's people that build technology. Certainly now, I know why this clock forward in 5 years' time and listen to this, it might be a different story. But let's go with the here and now. So it's very much focused on the people side of this and what it takes to go through a career. And again, if you're an entrepreneur and, what is the difference between being a founder and then transitioning into a CEO? A lot of people think it's just a name change, but it really is vastly different. So, Angela, thanks so much for joining us all the way from St. Petersburg. You are the first guest we've had on from that part of the world. So, a warm welcome. I'm not sure it's warm there, but it's kind of
Yes.
warmish in Joburg this morning.
Yeah, thank you so much, Darren, for inviting me, for organizing this recording, and I'm sure for a very insightful conversation. And speaking of weather, it is kind of like in South Africa, although it is summer here, but a lot more light. So sunrise before 4 a.m., sunset after 10 p.m. But other than that, temperature is very much like in South African winter.
Awesome. Well, that's good. At least it's not too alien. Angela, perhaps you can start with a quick intro, and then I'm going to dive into some topical questions, I think, and certainly questions that I've seen or topics that I've seen really recently on social media, again,
hmm
specifically LinkedIn, about sort of shifting identities, navigating into sort of leadership roles, moving into sort of that transformation area. So I'll delve deeper into that in a moment. But if you can give a quick intro, that would be great.
Yeah, sure, Darren. Quick intro. Right now, I'm working in change leadership and culture transformation. I help companies and leaders to create change ability or create what I like to call evolving company, which means that people, organization, and system created the capability to go through cycles of where they are to where they want to be a lot faster. And my company, Your Best Culture, focuses specifically on delivering that result through design for behavior change. And for folks maybe to understand it better what designer like for behavior change does, it's using behavioral science, it's using motivational psychology, it's using all the research we have on habit formation and applying it to design systems, to design our environment, processes, to create the desired behavior habits that for a specific result. So at first, okay, what result that we're seeking to create, what behavior is going to contribute to that, and how do we design systems to make this behavior happen more likely. On the governmental level, they call people like myself into sort of units with people like myself, nudge units. And a nudge is a feature of environment that makes certain behavior more likely. And so that is actually used widely at the level of systems and in governmental institutions to, for example, make people pay taxes or sign up for pension or some health plan. But in terms of business application, that is a quite new thing, even though leading companies are using it.
Amazing, thank you. Can we start with culture? Because this is something I've been in the world of sort of business and executive search for pretty much all my career, and I think the first thing that certainly when you speak to founders and you speak to those that maybe have sort of raised some capital, maybe at Series A or Series B, and the first thing they say is it's our culture. This is our culture.
Yeah.
Or they say, I want someone that's going to culturally fit. And then the natural response to that is, okay, can you describe your culture? And it's usually the same words, right? We're transparent and we're honest and we have integrity, and you can count them out on kind of two hands. What does culture mean from your perspective, right? Well, a broad question, but how would you describe a culture?
Culture, I like this definition of culture. It's what we repeatedly do. It's the manifestation of one's values, beliefs, and identities. On a personal level, one can say, let's say, I value health and fitness, and because of that, I do certain behavior. And because of that, I sort of create my personal culture of health and fitness. When it comes to company in our organization, let's say you have trust as a value. So if we are a culture of trust, what it is that we do and how we do it in order to live that culture. Because if there is no representation in behaviors that we do consistently, that we can measure, see, observe, track, then it becomes just a slogan on the wall, like written somewhere. And it's not a culture, it's slogan, right? So for me, culture is what we repeatedly do, even when even when we don't think about that.
Does culture change over the lifespan of a business? When you're half a dozen people to when you're 50 people, 100 people, 1,000 people, culture changes?
Yes, definitely. They say, well, there is research and definition of different cycles of companies' life, and so you have your startup stage, and then you have this scale up or growth stage, and then the growth, then the other stages, basically meaning you kind of balancing out. You're not worried about your cash flow or the business model, etc., and you just keep working, growing, and then there is this either decay or reinvention stage where you figure out a new way of delivering value, or you just cease to exist because you didn't manage to adapt to the market or what customer wants. And at each stage, you have different set of behaviors that you want to observe. For example, when you're a startup and you haven't yet figured out your cash flow, your best customer, your best business model, your culture has to be wrapped around experimentation and testing things and innovation, because you ultimately haven't yet figured out what it is, like your value proposition that's going to distinguish you from others, that's going to get you the market share that you want, right? So that's your culture, and it has to be represented through certain behaviors and priorities, right? How do you prioritize spending to your budget, working hours of your teams? So these are behaviors that then represent this culture of innovation and experimentation. And when you're a more evolved company and you are more established and you are perhaps thinking just deliver reliable service to your customers, that's where you start talking about the reliability and trust and and more transparency. And it's not like the startup doesn't care about that at all. It's just not the main priority when you're still trying to figure things out.
And each of those phases or stages of sort of a business evolution, there needs to be a transition, right? You have to
Yeah.
transition one to another. So, if we take an early stage startup, let's talk about a startup that may have 20 people, that has built a product, has an element of product market fit is now looking at scaling. So they've had their founding team in place. They're now looking at that next step, which is, okay, how do we scale? What needs to change? And how does that transition happen?
Less experimentation, more on the side of delivering reliable service, if I were to say it. And so that's where you have, some people are natural inventors. Like, you constantly want to try new things, test things out, even if there is this saying, go fast and break things. I don't remember the exact quote, right? But that's the mentality. And if some people will never be able to transition, you need to do this service in a very reliable way. So the customer can only expect a certain execution. Like, you go to Starbucks, you don't expect different coffee each time, right? That would be really undesirable. But some other smaller coffee shop might be like, yeah, we try different roasters and your coffee experience is unique every time, right? And some people can stay in that, can do the transition. Some people can. And you have to figure out through service, through assessments, or just move people into, let's say you have your innovation unit now and they stay there. And then to other people, there has to be very clear communication. And by communication, I don't just mean words you say. I also means what's incentivized, like what do you pay people bonus for? Whether that's again, service delivered in a certain way and you get your customer, evaluation, whether that's service delivered, I'm not sure exact KPIs, but all targeted towards create more reliability and repeated process. And some people are really good with that, so more routine stuff and less experimentation, just making sure they deliver great work on specs.
You mentioned process there, and at the beginning during your intro you were talking about sort of systems, right, and process. I think when you're a young company, when you're, again, 10, 20 people, there isn't really a need, right? A need to get sort of into the detail of processes and systems when it comes around sort of human capital. What's the first step a business could take in order to become a little bit more process aligned? And when we talk about process, it's not just a case of having kind of an HR file on someone and having their next of kin registered on a drive somewhere. It's more involved than that. But I don't think a company can go from having very little processes, onboarding, things like that, straight to having a fully functioning, fully automated human capital, system that's there and will do everything that you needed to do sort of automatically. So what would be that kind of gradual step?
The gradual step would be asking yourself question, okay, what is the purpose of our company? What a friend today asked me when I asked for connections, like, what's your value proposition? And basically, the company has to ask this question first. Moving forward, what is our value proposition? What service, what value do we deliver in customers' life? What problem do we solve? And the reason why you want to understand that, because then you can ask the next question. Well, what is absolute must to deliver for us to make this happen, this purpose, this value delivery? You prioritize what are key vital processes or deliverables that we absolutely need to focus all of our attention on. And that's where you want to start creating your systems and your processes first to support that delivery of that specific value. Because there are multiple things that you need to be taken care of. I don't know, from your taxes to reporting to God knows what, right? Like to create a proper business ecosystem. But is it vital for delivery of your service right now, the service that customers actually pay you for? To give you an example, I also do a lot of one-on-one coaching, and I often will sit down with myself and ask myself what it is my client pay me for. And I ask my clients, like, what are the vital elements without which you would not pay me for working together? One of the things that always comes up, accountability. If I don't provide it, it's like I don't exist. The rest doesn't matter. And so no matter what tool I use, what process, what system I create, I need to first maximize accountability. And because of that, I'm very like, I customize each solution for each client. I'm like, what will keep you accountable? What do you need to feel that accountability? Like all of the other stuff, again, the systems I use, the coaching app I use, the I don't know, the widgets, how we use emails or WhatsApp or some other stuff. It might like go in, again, different directions. My client don't care that much as long as that accountability factor is serviced for, and they want predictability there. They don't want me to be messaging on one platform, then on another, right? Creating more chaos. And so I need to have a system there first and foremost, and create step-by-step process for myself.
Very interesting. I think accountability, if we can just sort of hone in on that for a moment, because that kind of leads on to my next question. I think sometimes it can be very lonely as well. If you're a founder or even a co-founder, there are certain, or even going into a leadership role where you have kind of this, what do they call it, imposter syndrome, which a lot of people suffer from. And I want to make that next step up. I've got this opportunity, or I've got this business that has really got something tangible that I can make a difference. But I'm kind of afraid to ask people beneath me because there shows an area of weakness or insecurity. I don't really have anyone above me other than perhaps those that are funding me. And again, I don't want to give them any ideas that I'm not fully. I don't have all the answers. But being accountable to someone is really, really important. Because I think, again, as a leader, someone that's aspiring to be a leader, someone that is in that position, there's a lot you have to take on. And there's a lot of questions that people are reliant on answers for, and they kind of come to you, where you've got your own things, you've got your own kind of goals and your own aspirations. So when people are sort of coming to you and saying, I want to be accountable, is that in terms of sort of measurable, sort of smart goals people are setting for themselves and saying, actually, I just need someone to keep me on track because I've said I'm going to do X, Y, Z, and I'm so busy and I'm so distracted with ABC. How do I then focus on kind of the X, Y, Z? Are they the sort of conversations?
Making some notes to reply better. Yes, accountability is all about making sure, like on my side, that the person shows up for their goals, aspirations, and priorities that they say they have. The challenge why people need that is life gets, the higher you go as a leader, the more and more responsibilities you have, and the more and more sort of tabs you have to be aware of and keep track of. And so very often goals that seem to be that non-urgent, or goals, aspirations, just fall sideways and never happen. So that of showing up for your priorities. And I think I want to also mention here that the reason why it works having someone to keep you accountable is because all human beings are motivated by social status. How are we perceived by other people? And most of us want to be reliable, want to keep our word, want to fulfill certain expectations. And so when people come to others like myself, or maybe in a company, it's your superior, like immediate superior. Usually in companies, they create this ecosystem of people keeping each other accountable. So that works because of that innate human motivation that is hardwired in our psychology to be motivated by how you're perceived by others, by social accountability. And that's why coaching works. That's why I'm having, again, people just who keep track of what you do or know about your goals works so well. Again, nothing fancy, but because it taps into this innate human motivation, it works so well.
Amazing. It's very interesting. Again, to unpack the other sort of point that I mentioned as we started, but that's kind of the transformation of a founder into a CEO or into an executive role. And I think what we see, certainly in the world of FinTech, it's so dynamic. things happen so fast. I think in the world of AI these days as well, in terms of AI companies, they start from nothing, and the next minute, they're posting crazy results. And I think once you have got to a certain level of maturity, certainly when you've received funding, external funding, there is a different role that the business owner needs to take. And I've seen a few do this really successfully. I've seen a few not. If I was to look at them on the surface, you go, actually, I can't really see the difference. I think if you dig a bit deeper, perhaps those that have been able to make that transition have been less emotionally attached to their businesses. But I may be completely wrong there. What would be your take on that? What would be your recommendation? So if someone is going through that journey at the moment where they've been a very successful startup finder, and they have just raised some capital, they're now accountable to a board, to shareholders who are expecting certain results. How do they need to change in terms of their, not necessarily their values, but their focus, their priorities, their leadership styles? How would one go about that?
Yes, such a great question, Darren. And I would pick it a little bit differently. In my work, and I feel like it's a good way of working around definitions for anyone. So I never say like this is the definition and you need to be this. When it comes to changing your identity from entrepreneur to CEO or from startup founder to CEO, the thing that has to be there, like I don't really care how you define founder and CEO, but what I do care is what adjectives or actions do you sort of subscribe to each. Meaning, what does it mean for you to be a founder, and what do you feel like you need to become to become a CEO? I'll give you an example. When I started working on more seriously, like on expanding and scaling my business, I decided I'm no longer striving to be an entrepreneur. I'm striving to be a business owner. Like for me, it meant I'm now less in experimentation, trying things out, figuring out stage, and more about creating systems and making them work. Creating this focus. So I'm no longer looking for, oh, is this my opportunity? Is that my opportunity? Should I try this? Focus. I'm going to be focused. And that would mean for me, not exploring different opportunities, but figuring out how to make this thing work the best and deliver maximum value to people I serve and deliver maximum value into business. Right? And that was in transition. Again, it doesn't really matter because we all have our opinions. What for you to be a startup founder or a CEO, but you need to have clarity. What's the difference? At the end of the day, when I look at your schedule, at your behavior, I need to be able to see that transition. And what you think, I don't really care.
Very interesting.
Right? And that's like, I just wanted to add here. And that's true for each transition. What each leader and company need to do on figuring out transformation is what is my initial state, what our behaviors are, what our end state or end behaviors are. Like miracle question, if you walk out tomorrow and you already was in the future, what would change? How would I see it? And then design system to support that transition and specifically new set of behaviors that you want to see consistently.
And then off the back of those systems, and as you are scaling a business, and I think every founder, every business owner, every CEO wants to have a high performing team. Right, that's what everyone wants, a high performing team. Some are really successful in building that. Others aren't. What tends to be the difference between those that can create those really high-performing, almost autonomous, I'm not using it AI, but autonomous teams, autonomous leaders, sort of that next layer down? What is it that separates those that do that really well and those that might struggle?
In my experience, it all comes down to clarity again, of definitions and behaviors. What does it mean to be a high performing team in our company? Team dealing with, I don't know, hard for graphic design and very like creative at one set of behaviors. Team who is looking to optimize, automate, like, I don't know, Zapier, making more as things as efficient as possible might have different definitions for that. Then you have, when you have again 4, 5, 20 people, or you have 500 people, there are different teams also and you want to have very clear definition. What does it mean for us to be a high performing team? What are the KPIs that we can measure? What are the observable behaviors? And you need to spell, it's like, like if I were to cut a tree, I need to spend, I don't know, so much time just sharpening the knife before I get and do the cutting. So the same here, you need to think through and spend a lot of time there thinking through the exact behaviors that gonna be I lost a train of my thought. So you need you need to spell out like again the behaviors, what it is to be a high performing team, and then the second part of it is very essential part of it is designing. I always talk when it comes to people, you need to design for human motivation, and for human motivation, again, the research shows we care about 3 sort of buckets of things. Number 1 is praise, how our work is evaluated by other people, acknowledge that our work needed and important. The second thing, what I call perks, meaning what are we paid for, what are we given bonus for, like all this, tangibles. And the third one is progress, and that is visible growth towards meaningful goal. And in order for us to have this feeling of progress, we need to understand what's our goal in the first place. And in high performing team, you need to create systems, and by systems I mean like what software will you use and how do you organize your work environment? Let's say you're remote, you're hybrid, you are in person, right? You need to design systems to support these behaviors that you said are key for you to become a high performing team.
Very interesting. Really, really is. I think again, something you mentioned quite earlier on is when we were talking about the different stages of businesses, where they go from kind of very early stage to then sort of going in that transition period, and the next transition, and then you mentioned and some don't make it, and some fail, which is a reality of business. To talk about that mindset. So, unfortunately, things happen that are out of, entrepreneur, business owner, CEOs' controls. Macroeconomic issues, political issues, and whatever they may be that can have an absolute dire effect on that business. In terms of that transition, so someone has, in their own mind, maybe not been successful, or a venture has failed, or couldn't get funding, or whatever it may be, to then lift themselves up and to get themselves back into that sort of positive mindset of going, actually, no, I can do this, and these factors that contributed to the unwinding of one business actually has kind of has taught me, and I've kind of embedded this whole way of learning as my my kind of North Star. Do you give advice to people like that as well? Or do you, sorry, not advice, coach people like that as well?
I don't think I understood the question. Advice on what?
Yeah, sorry. Let me ask that. It was a roundabout way of asking a question. So people that have been through challenging times with their business, right? Whether they be a CEO, whether they be an entrepreneur, and the business hasn't worked for whatever reason, okay? And they're now looking at sort of rebuilding and getting back into a new job or a new venture. Is there an element of coaching that you do for those types of people as well as those that are already on that sort of successful journey?
100%. And I would say if you are a growth mindset person, you always going to be on a journey of failing and learning and improving and growing and then having some sort of success and then setting a new goal, and then you're going to be failing while figuring it out, and it's going to be continuous cycle as long as you are committed to growth. And if you're not, like they say, if you are either, Tony Robbins says, you're either growing or dying. So, the one would say that's the purpose of life, to constantly grow and learn. And what I help people, that leaders, entrepreneurs, there is always this failure and mistakes, like almost every session with every single person. And I think what my value there is to give people perspective and to help them see not just the negatives, but also the positives, the lessons, and why, because of this failure, they actually will get better, and we are on the trajectory of getting better. I also give people perspective of where you are right now, struggling, and what you've been through in your life, and how you've grown, and how actually this failure is what you considered extreme success just, I don't know, a few months, few years ago. And that's what I do. Again, it's happening to everyone all the time. I might see myself right now as failure because I'm figuring out a new level of my business, and it feels like struggle or challenge, like I'm not having sort of dumb, not having all of it figured out, because the answer is probably somewhere there. And you just keep showing up and like, I'm going to improve 1% a day, and looking back into your journey, like, where I was 3-4 months ago, actually, I already passed that and I solved for this challenge, right? And so yes, they call it mindset coaching, but what it basically gives you tools to do that reflection, that perspective taking, that ability to temporal traveling into the future and into the past to see your growth. It's just teaching you this mindset skill, so then you can do it without a coach.
Fantastic. I think we'll wrap up there, Angela. If I can just summarize that last point, I think for people who are listening to this, look at kind of what you've achieved as well. I wrote a post over the weekend about gratitude, and I think doing a very simple exercise like writing down the things you're actually grateful for, not necessarily looking at what you don't have, but actually what you do have, and sort of starting from that point. But Angela, if people would like to get in touch with you and talk to you about sort of executive coaching, maybe for themselves or for their business, where is the best place to find you?
I think LinkedIn. I'm very responsive. I post a lot of content. It's a really good place to go. If I were to answer the second one, maybe someone more on Instagram, then I'm there as well. So those two places where you can really connect with me fast and get a response. And I really appreciate when people give me feedback on my content, like that was useful, that I didn't really understand. So you might work on clarity.
Well, we'll certainly add some links at the bottom here with your LinkedIn profile and your Insta handles and things like that. So we'll put all that on. But Angela, thank you so much for your time this morning. Enjoy St. Petersburg, and I'll grab you for a coffee. Maybe not a Starbucks. I'm not a fan of Starbucks, but I'll again, that's just personal preference. I'm not plugging anyone here. And we will grab another coffee somewhere else in Cape Town when we're next in town.
Yes, that sounds fantastic, Darren. Thank you so much for the opportunity, for really thoughtful questions. Really appreciate it. And yes, looking forward to seeing you in person in Cape Town soon.
Likewise. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thanks, Angela.